Hi, everyone. We are here today with Dr. Morgan Nolte, and we are so excited to have you on our show today. We love connecting with like-minded individuals who are dedicated to sharing their experiences and their learnings with the goal of making the world a better place. So thank you for coming on our show today.
I'm happy to be
And
here. Thanks.
yes. And Morgan, we would love to know, what is the most adventurous thing you've done recently?
That's such a hard question for me. I love adventuring. However, in this season of life with a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, it's not happening as much as I would like. Let me think. I know that this sounds like kind of silly, but it was actually a couple years ago. We had these awesome neighbors. Mike and Kate are their names. He's a commanding officer of a nuclear submarine. She's a stay-at-home mom of 3, just a total BA, raising 3 boys. And so she took me, like, quote unquote mountain biking at a state park in Nebraska. So it's not mountain biking, it's just like hills. And that was the most exhilarated I've been since like adolescence, because it was something that you're like kind of out of control, but it's so exciting and so fun. So I think that that was probably the last time that I really felt adventurous.
Well, maybe you need to find some ways to add little mini adventures into your life.
I do. I do. Yeah. So I just adjusted my microphone there. Mahoney State Park is close to us and they have like a great indoor rock climbing wall. So we like to go rock climbing. We've done a little bit of bicycling, but yeah, I'm just not in that season of life as much. So it's like
Yes.
those little mini adventures that are still fun with the kids, but not something that's really feeding my spirit for adventure. So we are going to visit Kate and Mike and the boys in New York this summer. And so I'm guessing we'll have some hiking or adventures out there because they always kind of tow us along. They're very adventurous.
Well, that's
Awesome.
great. Yes. And bring those boys with you. It doesn't have to be the hugest adventure, right?
Yes. Yep.
So, Morgan, we'd love to dive in and start talking about insulin and insulin resistance and all the work that you're doing. And I know most of our listeners probably have heard of insulin resistance and many know what it is, but just for those who may not, or as a refresher, can you just define for us what is insulin resistance and then maybe dive into some of the common signs and symptoms of being insulin resistant that listeners may just be dismissing as, oh, it's part of getting older. A lot of our listeners are women and we're in our 40s and 50s and 60s and things change as we age, and sometimes we just dismiss those symptoms as being normal and they're really not.
Yeah. And I think we're also just desensitized in general to what health looks like and what health feels like. And especially as people get older, their doctors become more and more dismissive of those little signs and symptoms of insulin resistance. So let's start with what it is. It's simply when your cells become less sensitive to the hormone insulin. And insulin has a few jobs. It's made by your pancreas, and the primary job is blood sugar control. And so if you have prediabetes, high blood sugar, or type 2 diabetes, you absolutely have insulin resistance. But a lot of people don't know that high blood pressure is actually one of the first signs of insulin resistance. I see a lot where people are put on a high blood pressure medication before they're put on a high blood sugar medication. So that's something really to be conscientious of, is if you have high blood pressure, there's a good chance you have insulin resistance. So those are 2 of the primary symptoms that are going to pop up, because when, like, every single cell in your body has an insulin receptor. And so when your blood vessel cells become insulin resistant, they don't dilate as much, contributing to high blood pressure. When your liver cells become insulin resistant, you get fatty liver disease. When your muscle cells and your fat cells become insulin resistant, you get prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. When your brain cells become insulin resistant, you get some level of cognitive impairment. Like Alzheimer's disease is now being called type 3 diabetes, and they're looking more and more at the metabolic causes of brain disease. So I think it's important to highlight that no cell goes untouched when it comes to insulin resistance. And again, it's just resistance to the hormone insulin. It's as simple as that. So think about it like this. Like, if you are an alcoholic and you used to get buzzed after 2 drinks, maybe 3 drinks, over the years, your body becomes kind of desensitized to the alcohol. You become resistant to the effects. So it takes more and more to get the same buzz. And that's how it is with insulin, is over time, after an onslaught of a processed food diet or a high carbohydrate diet, physical inactivity, chronic sleep deprivation, chronic stress, all of those things are going to contribute to high levels of insulin, high levels of inflammation. They really feed on each other. So what happens is your cells they tune it out. It's like a kid, like one of my kids, let's go brush your teeth, go brush your teeth, go brush your teeth. It gets louder and louder and louder and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so here's a big problem though, that I see with how insulin resistance is being addressed today is it's being ignored. And so, as I just said, your insulin levels are rising over 10 to 20 years before the blood sugars are going to start to rise. And physicians and patients are only checking their fasting glucose and their fasting their hemoglobin A1C, which is like a 3-month estimate of glucose. And so they're completely missing decades of time where they can be making these proactive low insulin lifestyle changes to prevent prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, fatty liver disease in the first place. And that's really where my passion lies, is helping people understand that if you want good metabolic health, then the best way to get there is this low insulin, low inflammation lifestyle. Developing these systems around nutrition and exercise and sleep and stress and mindset to really help you get to optimal health and remain there as long as possible.
Which is our goal. Marnie and I talk about longevity and quality of life, and that we both want to live to 100, and live a really quality life. So that's amazing what you're doing.
Thanks.
So how do you think, just listening to what you said, I'm 51, Stephanie's 50, and I hear a lot of people saying that their symptoms are just, oh, I'm getting older. What do you think about that in regards to insulin resistance?
Well, I think that part of it, transitioning through menopause is a real thing. When the estrogen drops, your insulin resistance naturally will rise. Your cortisol levels will naturally rise. And so I want to just kind of explain a little bit hormonally what happens with age, but also explain there are things that you can do, lifestyle changes you can make to counteract some of those natural changes. So when your estrogen goes down, a lot of women are going to notice around menopause that they're gaining weight, specifically belly fat, and the overall body fat, like their body composition is changing. And I'll hear a lot like, well, all of a sudden I'm pre-diabetic, even though I didn't really change anything that I ate. Or all of a sudden, my shirts aren't fitting, they're getting tighter around the midsection, even though I'm not changing how I'm eating or exercising. There are real hormonal changes going on in midlife as a woman transitions kind of through menopause. And so when that estrogen goes down, estrogen is insulin sensitizing. So when we lose that, we lose some of that sensitization to insulin, and levels naturally go a little bit higher. But also your adrenal glands and your fat tissue pick up some of the slack of estrogen production because your ovaries are kind of shut down. They're like, we did our job, guys, peace out, we're done. So adrenals and fat tissue become more valuable. So what does that mean? Practically speaking, your fat tissue becomes more valuable real estate. Your body doesn't want to release it as easily because fat tissue is making that important hormone estrogen. What it also means is that stress management becomes even more critical in this phase of life. And I'm talking about all levels of stress management: mental stress, emotional stress, work stress, just stress from sleep deprivation, metabolic stress from a poor diet or alcohol consumption. We want to really focus on stress management so that the adrenals aren't, shall we say, stressed out too much by producing a bunch of stress hormones and trying to keep up with the estrogen needs of the body. So those changes can be mitigated, again, with this low insulin, low inflammation approach. The other changes that happen with age are natural declines in certain key hormones responsible for maintaining muscle mass and for growth. And so things like human growth hormone and testosterone, all of those things are going to naturally decline. And so we want to counteract that with strategies, with nutrition and exercise that support lean muscle mass as you age. So yes, part of getting older, like father time affects us all. Like death is like the only inevitable thing in this life. And so I think what we can do is control the controllable, right? So some hormone replacement therapy for people that it's very appropriate for, some strategic supplementation for muscle mass, and then really getting your nutrition, your sleep, your stress, and your exercise dialed in is what it's going to take to counteract those natural hormone changes. But things like high blood pressure, high blood sugar, the joint pain and inflammation, the brain fog, the fatigue, all of those are lifestyle related. And so many examples online, like there are so many people aging so beautifully, maintaining health and fitness and function and cognitive capacity well into their 90s. And so I think that should be the goal for everybody, but it does take intentionality in our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, if we want to get to that, century mark and still be functioning and well and able to enjoy life.
So this is all great. And we want to get into like more of what these lifestyle skills are, because I think they'll provide a lot of practical guidance and strategies for people. But backing up just a little bit, if we think about just like the role that insulin plays in the body and what you can do even before you get to menopause to reduce, like what diet and lifestyle habits, if you will cause that insulin resistance to start growing at a younger age. And then obviously, like, if you get to that point, we can talk about ways to start to reverse that.
Yeah.
Just backing up a little bit.
Absolutely. So,
and this is even out there, I'm just going to think for parents who are maybe, in their menopause years or women, but think about your kids. And so all of us are mothers. And, I think this conversation can't happen soon enough. And it's not something to be like crazy about as a mom, like watching everything your kid eats, but just in general, how can you start to form those good habits at an early age? Because like you said, this isn't something that just happens at a certain point in time. It builds up over many years.
Yeah. Well, I think, again, we are so desensitized to how our species has evolved over the years, right? Like diabetes, obesity, these are new diseases, relatively speaking, and they really happen because of our culture and our lifestyle and our habits. And so when we're looking at, okay, what are some of those habits? A lot of them, unfortunately, are misinformed efforts to be healthy. Like I've talked to a lot of women who are like, I've dieted my way to being overweight and sick. And so sometimes it's not for a lack of effort, it's for a lack of correct information. And so I always like to say, like, you just have to take baby steps, but they have to be in the right direction. And I think a lot of people are taking steps in the wrong direction, getting where they don't want to go. So how do we kind of back up and say, where do we start? The first thing is we've got to get rid of this notion that we need to eat every 2 hours to keep our metabolism up. Every single time you eat, insulin is going to be released. And what you eat will make a big difference on how much insulin is released, because it's high levels of insulin over a long period of time that contribute to insulin resistance. So if you are eating every few hours, the first thing that I would suggest is try to eat 3 square meals a day. And then within those meals, we want to first prioritize protein. So a huge mistake that people are making is underdosing their protein. They're like, well, I'm having a couple eggs for breakfast. I'm like, that's fine, but that's only 12 grams of protein. Or I'm having this, I think it's the Nature Valley brand, this high protein granola for breakfast. And there's 13 grams of protein in that. I'm like, yeah, but look at the back. There's actually 15 grams of added sugar per serving, and you're having 2 servings. So you're having, 3/4 of a pop every morning for your healthy breakfast. And so we have to get very good at understanding, how does this food impact my insulin? How does this food impact my inflammation? And so if we're breaking it down, I don't want to get into the solutions too much. You kind of ask, like, what are we doing to cause the problem? We're eating too often. We're eating too many carbohydrates, especially for our sedentary lifestyle. Athletes, people who are super active, they can get away with eating a higher carbohydrate diet because their muscles are using that glucose for energy. But so many of us have segued our physical activity time to like 30 minutes a day. And then the rest of the day we're sitting. And that's not how our bodies have been designed to work optimally. We're designed to move throughout the day. That's why my husband weighs like 155 pounds wet and he's 6'1". He's a farmer. He's moving all day long. He's lifting. He's metabolically active all day. And he can maintain his weight and still eat a ton of food. And he has, in my opinion, very good genetics. But that's a huge factor that's contributing to insulin resistance, is this culture of, all right, I have 30 minutes or 20 minutes or 45 minutes to work out, and then that's my movement for the day. That's great. We want intentional exercise, but we also need to break up these long periods of sitting. I have a high-low desk, so whenever I want, I can bump this baby up and I can stand and work. I think another thing is just added sugar. We talked about high carbohydrates, and sometimes people don't understand. Yes, there are starches like pasta, rice, bread, like that bottom of the food pyramid that we used to be encouraged to eat 6 to 11 servings a day. I know I tried to do that in high school, and I weighed 10 pounds more in high school than I do today for that reason. And the other thing is sugar. There is so much sugar hiding everywhere. We were at a baseball game for the College World Series, and there was a family in front of us, and the girl was probably in 3rd grade, maybe. And in the couple of hours that we were there, she had, oh gosh, a box of Mike and Ike's, a big box of Mike and Ike's, a slushie, a pretzel, and then something else that was, like a Sprite,
popcorn. Yeah.
a pop. No, just straight up sugar. And so I'm like, this little girl has had more sugar than I have like in a whole 6 months, year, maybe in 2 hours. And so the average child is eating like 81 grams of sugar these days a day. That's like 2 Pepsi's worth of sugar.
And it's like the norm. I just want to say, like, this is like you're saying it, but I see this every day. Like, this is how most people are eating, and they think it's normal.
I just dropped kids off at the babysitters this morning, and it was 9 o'clock, and the 3 little kids next door, who were no more than 6, were having an ice cream sandwich. And I'm like, it's 9 in the morning.
I'm
And
sorry.
I'm like, I hope that they don't offer my kids that, but I just left. Yes, you're right. Like going to like a Husker football game, I'll just like watch some people like go to the concession stands, like, 4 or 5 times during the game. But that used to be me. My dad, this is ridiculous. My dad used to give me a $20 bill at a high school football game. That went a long ways back in high school. And I swear I got like one of everything during those games. I was that person. I grew up eating dessert every day. My dad brought my brother and I, or my brother and me, however you say that, a candy bar every single day after school because he wanted one, right? So he stopped at the gas station, got himself a candy bar, got us a score bar, whatever, till we fought too much. And he's like, well, you guys don't deserve this anymore. So we didn't get our candy bar. But what did that do? What did all of this sugar do? It conditioned me to have such a sweet tooth coming into adulthood. And then once like I failed my first blood sugar test with my son, and by 1 point, and I had had breakfast that morning, which I thought was sensible, some eggs, some toast with cinnamon sugar. And they called me and they're like, well, you're going to have to come in and do it again. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And I think anybody who has had some sort of alarming test thinks like that, like, no, I can't be that bad. Like, surely this isn't happening. This must have been a mistake. But I was so disappointed in myself deep down that I didn't know better. I'm like, I studied nutrition. I'm a physical therapist. I work with people with diabetes. And so what I realized was there was a lot of misinformation. And I think that has been contributing to insulin resistance more than anything else, is this misinformation that eating whole grains is healthy, that eating a bunch of fruits and vegetables is healthy. It's like we are not giving specific enough information on nutrition to actually help people. So misinformation about nutrition is a huge contributor. Stress. I mean, you guys, like we live in a weird world right now. I have 2 box lights shining on me. I know you're wearing blue light blockers there, Stephanie, which is great. I'm sitting for a lot of the day. I'm on a lot of the day, and I have a relatively very low stress job. There are people out there who are very stressed out in their work. They're very stressed out in their family life. They're losing sleep regularly. And this level of chronic stress, speaking of kids, over commitment, over scheduling ourselves, we're burning out. And that's raising cortisol. And what happens with that? Like your blood sugars go up. What happens when your blood sugars go up? Your insulin goes up. What happens when that happens? You get insulin resistance and you get sick. So that's why I say it has to be a lifestyle change. You can't just go on the keto diet or start intermittent fasting or start a strength training program and think that you're going to see meaningful lasting results, because the cure must match the cause. And if the cause is you're working till 9 at night and working on the weekends because you have poor boundaries around work and you're attached to people pleasing, then cutting carbs is not going to be the solution. Right? Because it's not excess glucose from your diet that's causing the problem. It's excess glucose your body is making from high cortisol levels. So I think that's really where the confusion comes in around insulin resistance and disease. Is we see a lot of talk about eat the wrong things, essentially eat whole grains, eat fruits, eat your vegetables, exercise, not enough conversation about stress management, sleep, behavior change, specific nutrition stuff, specific exercise stuff. So that's kind of my passion, is helping people untangle all of this misinformation.
And I just want to add to what you were saying, which I agree with, is that, putting the nutrition piece aside, even just feeling stressed and not getting enough sleep can send you into this vicious cycle where you wake up and you're craving sugars and carbs, and then you're eating it, and then you feel sluggish. And I mean, it can spiral really, really fast and easily. And I think untangling that, like you said, can be really difficult for people.
I think a lot of people start in the wrong places, honestly, when they're trying to do this. I think a lot of people start with diet first. And we teach kind of a backwards approach. We teach mindset first. So like a daily morning mindset routine, really helping people cast that vision for their wellness. How does the future version of myself show up? And I'm going to start making decisions from the future version of myself. I'm going to accept and reject ideas from the goal. And so I think when we start with that mindset, what that does is, first off, it's like 15 minutes in the morning, right? It's free. It's easy. It takes no physical activity, and it gives you self-esteem and self-confidence. It's like, if you can do something for like 10, 15 minutes every day, that's free, easy, takes no physical activity, boosts your self-confidence, helps you feel grateful. That is like putting on your glasses for the day. You're going to see the world in a different way. You're going to see your choices in a different way. And then after that, we want to focus on sleep. Just like you said, when you are sleep deprived, making healthy dietary changes or exercise choices is so difficult. So we want to focus on the sleep habits. And then from there, we just start with the hydration and then work into the nutrition. So I think that people sometimes they feel like they're trying really hard, and there's this effort to outcome mismatch because they're not taking the right first steps and building that foundation. And it's just harder than it needs to be, I think, for a lot of people right now.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that, because I think Marty and I have both seen in our individual health coaching practices, when we first started out 9 years ago or so now, it was very food focused. And I was more food focused, even though I took a holistic view, but it was food and it was exercise, right? And it was very much the physical body, because as a society, we place so much emphasis on how we look. And Marty and I grew up in the diet culture eras with moms always on diets and losing weight and all that. And now what I see, even in the last year, is I would say 85 to 90% of the time I spend with clients has nothing to do with food.
Right.
They need to unpack everything that's holding them back from making those changes, those lifestyle changes, and sleep and getting off the couch and not sitting and watching TV for 2 hours every night after dinner, right? And focusing on getting outside and moving your body and just being in natural sunlight and all that and stress, and a lot of limiting beliefs. And so even those quick changes that you could make for your diet, if you don't address like the root cause of what's holding you back from that vision that you mentioned and doing that in the morning, then those changes aren't going to be sustainable. They're just not, they're short-term fixes.
Yeah. But I like to describe like the mental weight versus the physical weight. And I think that, the mental weight is the stuff, all of the stuff that you just said. And I think a lot of people are trying to lose their physical weight without addressing the mental weight. And that's like driving with one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake. Like you're just going to burn your engine out. So we really need to, instead of like pushing more on the gas, dieting more, exercising more, how much farther could we go if we just release the brake pedal, if we release some of these attachments that we have to our habits or to expectations of others or to expectations of ourselves? Like how much farther can we go if we lose some of the mental weight? Because I always like to say you'll never lose the physical weight and keep it off if you don't also lose the mental weight, because the mental weight, like the physical, in my opinion, the physical weight is typically a manifestation of the mental weight. Like the mental weight comes first, the physical weight kind of lags behind. And so if that's true, then let's address the mental weight. Let's address the mindset side of things. Let's talk about your self-talk. Let's talk about how you're feeling, because when push comes to shove, eating is emotional. And so we have to learn how to master our thoughts in order to master our emotions. And once we have that emotional mastery and regulation, it's so much easier to control what you're eating and to have appropriate portions and right food choices and not go to the cookies and the ice cream when you're super stressed out. So I think that that's kind of my passion too. I'm equally passionate about insulin resistance, disease prevention, because I'm very realistic to know just like giving people the information that they need is not enough, because a lack of information is not a thing these days. There's thousands and millions of hours of YouTube content, millions of hours of podcasts, thousands of books on this stuff, but people are still not taking action, like you said, because they have limiting thoughts. So I think a big part of our jobs collectively as podcast hosts, podcast guests, is to help people remove those blocks, remove those limiting thoughts, and figure out, okay, how do I release the foot from the brake pedal? Because I think far too many people focus so much on pushing on the gas pedal and it's burning them out.
Well, and I completely agree with what you guys both just said. And I'm thinking about a lot of women I know that are very focused on calorie restriction specifically. And what would you say to them in regards to how that affects, metabolism, insulin resistance, and all of the mindset stuff we just talked about?
Yeah, well, I will say that calories do matter. Low insulin calories are still calories. This is a lesson that took me years to learn. I was like, I'll just eat, all these low insulin foods and I'll reach my ideal body composition. I'll reach that ideal weight. And it didn't happen until I really dialed in my portions and my calories also. So I think starting off, just swapping the food choices for healthy whole foods, prioritize protein and healthy fat, non-starchy vegetables, berries, avocados, all of that kind of stuff. I think everybody knows kind of in general how to do that. But calories do matter. So I think that we do have to be mindful of that. We have to be mindful that if you have excess body fat, you have energy in your body to use. So I think intermittent fasting, just from the research, from anecdotal evidence, from personal experience, if you want to lose weight, I think intermittent fasting is a more effective strategy than chronic calorie restriction. It's easier because it helps reduce the food chatter, as long as people don't have a history of like an eating disorder or an exercise disorder. And it really allows the glucose and insulin to drop lower than if you're eating those 3 meals a day. So I think that's just starting at like 12 to 14 hours a day of fasting is a great place for everybody. That really kind of cuts any like middle of the night eating or late night snacking. But that chronic calorie restriction, I don't think is a great strategy. Like the Nutrisystem diets, the Octavia diets, I think that the research really does show that, or frankly, weight loss medications, like weight loss surgeries, a lot, like pretty much anything that's going to drastically reduce your food intake, they can have long-term unintentional consequences related to muscle mass and bone health. So a good example, I was talking to someone this weekend and she had a lap band surgery for weight loss. And she said, I probably prevented some health issues, but it definitely caused others because I wasn't able to eat and nobody told her what to eat to maintain muscle health and bone health. And now she has osteoporosis. So I think sometimes when we're trying to solve a weight problem, we're unintentionally causing a bone health or a muscle health problem because we're not getting the right foods. So I think in my opinion, calorie restriction can work, but it must be a high protein diet when you're in a calorie restricted state. Otherwise, you're going to be losing way too much muscle mass, way too much bone mass. And I still prefer an intermittent fasting strategy over just baseline calorie restriction. I just think it's more effective and easier to manage.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. So you touched on this earlier. Can we shift gears a little bit and talk about how insulin resistance is really becoming the central cause of Alzheimer's and kind of being coined now, you mentioned earlier, as type 3 diabetes? Because I know that's something that a lot of our listeners are starting to focus on, one for themselves, but also they have aging parents, and a lot of people are in that phase where they're having memory issues. And also just what we can do now to prevent that. It's probably a lot of the same things that you said. And if you're at the point where maybe you have a parent or yourself and you're starting to suffer from some memory issues, is it too late to turn it around from an insulin resistance standpoint?
Let's start with kind of a little bit more of the physiology behind it, I guess.
Yeah.
Alzheimer's disease used to be thought to be caused by plaques and tangles in the brains, essentially. So if anybody's familiar with those, they know what I'm talking about, but structural things. But what's actually happening beneath that layer is metabolic dysfunction. So the plaques and the tangles are actually symptoms, effects of the cause. And there's 3 primary causes that they've identified that contribute to those plaques and tangles, to cognitive impairment, to depression, to anxiety. I mean, I'm going on and on here because it's true. If you have depression, if you have anxiety, if you have ADHD, I highly recommend you read the book, Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind by Dr. Georgia Ede. I think that's the best book out there that describes the physiology behind central or brain insulin resistance. So high levels of insulin, high levels of inflammation, and high levels of oxidative stress. Those are the 3 key things that are contributing to poor brain health. So when we're talking about blood sugar, we're also talking about brain sugar. So whatever is good for your blood sugar is good for your brain sugar. Whatever is bad for your blood sugar is bad for your brain sugar. So eating a diet that is lower in carbohydrate, and when people are like, well, what does that really mean? I typically recommend no more than 90 grams of net carbohydrates per day, spread out equally between 3 meals. That's really no more than about 30 grams of net carbohydrates per meal. You want 30 to 50 grams of protein per meal, and then fill in the rest of your calories with fat. And you really don't need that many carbohydrates. So you can lower that even more. And people who are very insulin resistant, very diabetic probably should. But then we have to talk about the inflammation and the oxidative stress. And I think inflammation is really where gut health comes in, because a lot of people are trying to make better choices. They're trying to make low carb choices. They're getting the protein bars, they're doing the protein powders. They're getting the keto. A great example of this is the keto Cool Whip or Ready Whip that, spray it in your mouth and then it's so yummy. However, in that is, I think, sucralose, last I checked, and then carrageenan, which is a food emulsifier. And those food emulsifiers, especially I think it's pronounced lecithins, and then the carrageenan, and then there's a few other ones that causes inflammation in your gut. Okay, what happens then is the cells in your gut kind of spread apart and contribute to leaky gut. And then microbes within your gut that are supposed to stay in your gut leak out into your body and can contribute to systemic inflammation. So we have to also not just focus on the macronutrients, like I mentioned, but also micronutrients and just added chemicals, added food emulsifiers, added artificial sweeteners. all of those things, they can put keto on the label, but they're still going to be causing inflammation. They're blocking you from reaching your goal. So I think I'm very passionate, more and more so. I get like foods can be a bridge. I get that. I used that myself. I still use it sometimes, but more and more, we really want to focus on a whole foods diet that is properly structured with the right macronutrients so that we're not like adding fuel to the inflammatory fire with all of these food additives. And then the other thing is oxidative stress, and there's a lot of causes of that, but like smoking is huge. And then drinking alcohol. I think a lot of people are desensitized to how much alcohol we are consuming. And they, justify, oh, a glass a night here and there is fine. And it's like, well, if that's your choice, that's your choice, but that's not a necessary food. And it's actually a toxin to your body. And it absolutely shuts off fat burning because the alcohol it's a toxin. And so your body is going to prioritize metabolizing that, getting rid of that before it gets rid of anything else that you just ate. So it completely shuts off fat burning. So I think that those three things, lowering insulin, lowering inflammation, lowering oxidative stress, those are critical components to brain metabolism, keeping it healthy. The other thing here too, though, is it's multifaceted. So my grandma, for example, I think she's 85 or 86. She just got some cognitive assessments yesterday, has mild cognitive impairment. And I can trace back, I can tell you exactly what's wrong with her diet and all these things. But she has actually been overly focused on being thin her whole life. And now she's osteopenic and she has pretty severe sarcopenia. And it's like we can have this emphasis on being too thin and it can have negative effects. She drinks wine every night, all of those things. She's not a regular exerciser. Yeah, you can be at a healthy weight. You can be thin and you can still not be at your optimal health. So
Skinny fat.
yes,
Yep.
we have to like unlink this notion that being super, super thin is desirable. It's not desirable. It's risky for your health. So we want to have a nice balance of muscle mass. But for her, it's definitely the lifetime drinking that has contributed to the oxidative stress and the cognitive impairment. And the primary recommendations, were stay active, like stay engaged in your community, stay engaged in your church, do the computer games, read the newspaper, talk to your family. And so when it comes to brain health, nutrition is so important, but we also have to talk about the social aspect and the environmental aspects too. But that's just, all of my answers are long-winded. So that's the long-winded answer to the question on how does high insulin contribute to Alzheimer's disease?
Well, I just want to reemphasize, because I think the point you brought up about your grandma and this focus on being thin, because there is still so much focus. And we kind of went through a period, body love and all that, which is great. But there's still a focus. We have teenage daughters, Marnie and I do, and I see what they're looking at and I see what girls are posting. And there's still very much a focus on having that bikini body and all that. So I think this is just so important. Like, I don't think we can say this enough as for women, because there's still a lot of women that have that focus. And, just even what you said with alcohol, shutting off fat burning. I don't know. We've talked a lot about alcohol and being sober curious and all this on our podcast several times. I don't know we focus so much on that, but that's got to get people's attention who are focused on losing weight, right?
Yes, cut the
But
alcohol.
also just like having a healthy body and what that means for you, because all of our bodies are different. And I'd much rather, carry some extra weight, whatever that even means, and have a healthy life where I'm living to 100 and I'm sharp and I'm with it and I'm able to still go move my body however it is I want to do when I'm older, than focus on what I look like on the physical. Maybe that's just because I'm now 50 and so I've gotten through those years, but I don't think we can talk enough about this topic, I guess, because there still is so much focus on and the skinny fat, like Marnie mentioned, it's real. So
I think you can have both though. Like I feel like if you focus on great metabolic health, then a healthy, slim physique is the natural byproduct of that. But my point there was if you're only focusing on weight, if you're only focusing on being slim, you can totally miss the mark long term and cause unintentional health consequences.
Right. And I just think if your focus is only on the physical, then you're missing out on so much more inside anyway. So anyway, I just thought
I agree.
And I just want to bring up one other point. As you're talking about macros and, different kinds of nutrients and how much protein a person needs and how much carbs a person needs, I do feel strongly that it's super individual because like Stephanie and I are both doing training for an endurance event right now.
Right. Yeah.
And so our needs are different,
Yep.
for instance, than, someone who's walking every day.
Yep.
For 30 minutes.
Yeah,
So
so I'm
I
so
do
curious,
just
like,
want to
I agree.
reiterate to our audience that, that it's individual to each person and what you're doing.
And day to day too. Like, I think once you get really good at this, like, I'm guessing that your nutrition on your training days differs than from the nutrition on your non-training days.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm kind of curious to pick your brains. Are you guys training for Everest?
Well,
so it's everyone keeps asking that. It's called 29029 Everesting. And what it is you go to a mountain. It's very curated. We're going to Mount Tremblant in Canada, and you hike up the mountain 15. We're going to hike it 15 times in 36 hours, which is the equivalent of hiking Everest. So it's 29,029 feet.
Like vertical feet. Yeah.
And I have to ask you guys, so how has your nutrition changed? Because this is a beautiful example, right? Because I get people who do like distance biking or distance running, and I have to explain to them, your body, if you want to perform at the level you want, it actually needs carbohydrates, but here's how you can strategically time them around your workouts to minimize the insulin response. But how has your guys' nutrition changed since you started this training, or what are you guys doing to kind of support that training?
Well, so Stephanie, you can answer in 1 second. For me, like I wasn't eating a lot of carbs in my life in general. So I was eating quite a bit of protein, not a lot of carbs. I actually just met with a nutritionist this week, and she was like, you need to add some carbs to your diet with the amount of exercise that you're getting, on a daily basis. She's like, so anyway, I have added some carbs like quinoa and some extra fruit to my diet in the last few days, and I already notice a difference. It's kind of crazy.
Yep. You're replenishing the muscle glycogen, all the things that you form. Yeah.
I would say the same. I'm just, and there are certain foods that I had stopped eating on a regular basis, like bananas as much. And because my workouts weren't as endurance. I mean, I've never trained for an endurance event. So it's like adding more bananas and fruit to my smoothie with the protein and the fat and adding quinoa, like Marnie mentioned, or eating, I'm pretty much gluten-free, but I'll eat some like really high quality gluten-free toast now after my salad. So I'll pair it, sort of after from an insulin standpoint to not spike the blood sugar if I'm not working out, or eating certain bars that are more like dates. So like naturally sweetened foods that I get that quick energy from when I'm on a hike. So it's been fun just to do something different, not only because I hadn't thought about the food when we signed up for this event. I was focused on the physical training and not the food. And even just like having to eat like while working out. Because I don't typically work out that long, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I was just one other thing that I've noticed is that I'm really thoughtful about what I'm putting in my body. So like, I really have not been craving like sweets at all during this training, which is really strange because usually I'll crave like, dark chocolate or like I want something after dinner or whatever it is. And recently I haven't been, which I think is super interesting. And it's also just making me take a step back and think even more about what I'm putting in my body. So like alcohol, for instance, I do drink alcohol, but like I've basically been drinking maybe 1 to 2 drinks a week on the weekend because during the week, I mean, we're training on the weekends too, but like I want to be up early and I want to do my training and I want to be focused and it feels really good.
Yeah. It does feel good. Yeah, I'm with you. I interviewed, I think his name is James Swanwick on my podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he's been on our podcast.
Yeah, he was so, first off, I love his accent. And then second of all,
of course,
he was so motivating for me. I love when you meet people with just that dogged conviction of like, this is how I'm going to live my life. And so I'm not completely sober, I would say. Like I've had maybe like a drink in the last few months. But for me, it's more of I used to just kind of do it a little bit mindlessly. Like
Right.
my husband would get like the press drinks or the White Claws, and we'd be kind of just like winding down, watching the kids play outside. Hey, you want one? Sure. But it's like I didn't necessarily want it until somebody offered it to me, and then I was just kind of doing it just because I didn't have like a good reason to do it. And I'm like, I don't really want the like this is fine. So for me, it wasn't a big deal at all, and now it's more of like we're going out to dinner, having a glass of wine type of thing. And that's super rare. So I really enjoy it because it makes it easier to maintain my weight. It doesn't affect my sleep, like all the things. So
Yeah.
Yes.
he was
Yes.
great.
Well, this has been, I can't believe this conversation's going by so quickly. So Morgan, can you tell us a little bit about, I know you have like your program and you've got educational information on your website, and there's like a free download that people can get as well, and how they
Yeah.
can find you.
Of course. So we have an online program that really teaches people how to implement these low insulin and inflammation lifestyle changes. So it's our Zivli program, and it opens in September again. So we only open it a couple times a year. It's a very robust online curriculum, and I take people through 1 week at a time with weekly live group coaching, just every single aspect that we touched on today, but in so much more detail with, implementation steps and all that good stuff. So that opens in September, and I'm on Instagram at Dr. Morgan Nolte. If they want like a jump start on the September program, we have a free food guide that they can download. I think I'm going to send you guys that link. You can link it up. That has so many great examples of low insulin foods. I love the tables that we put in there because it has like serving sizes of different types of protein to get that minimum dose of 30 grams. And then we have like the calories and stuff broken down in there too. And a lot of like high fiber tables, high fiber, low carb food tables in there for people. And our website is zivli.com. So zivli.com. And then the last place, well, two places, I have a podcast, Reshape Your Health. And then that's on YouTube too. You can just YouTube me at Dr. Morgan Nolte. And I really suggest people start with the Insulin Resistance for Beginners playlist. So if what I spoke to or about today really resonated with people, I want them to know a couple things. You asked me a question I didn't directly answer. You said, is it ever too late?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of like my parents' age, and yeah.
It can be too late. Some changes are not reversible. Like I always like to say, we want to deal with problems when they're a little rock or they're a little pebble, not when they're a boulder. Once you have a stroke and part of your brain dies, that's not really going to come back. Once you have a heart attack, that stuff isn't going to come back. Once you have severe peripheral neuropathy, that's probably not going to be restored completely. Once you have cognitive impairment to some degree, that's probably not going to be completely restored. So I think what's very important for people to understand is you can pause, like you can stop the progression with lifestyle changes. You may see slight reversal, but there is a point in time where something happens and you can't take that back. And so I think it's important for people to understand it is never too late to make healthy lifestyle changes. You will always see the benefits. And so I didn't want to dismiss that question because I think people do need to know that there is a point where you get a boulder and you can't get rid of it. It's happened. It's done in the past. And so please, 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 for whoever is listening, I hope this helped. Download the food guide. Go watch that Insulin Resistance for Beginners playlist on YouTube. There's so many free, helpful resources out there. I really hope people take advantage of them because that's why I created them.
That sounds great. And we will link all that up in the show notes.
Thanks.
And Morgan, one question we love to ask all of our guests is, what does the art of living well mean to you?
Oh my gosh, I love this question. The first one was harder. The one that we started with, that was harder. This one's so easy for me. It is having a peaceful life, like a harmonious life. I don't necessarily believe in work-life balance. I believe in work-life harmony. I want to live from my values. I want to live from the values of faith, family, relaxation, joy, love. And what that means to me is creating a life where I can be the wife that I want to be. I can be empathetic. I can be compassionate. I can be present. I can pick up the slack when he's working hard. I want to be the mom that I want to be. So I want to do drop off. I want to do pickup. I want to be intentional and engaged and present and patient and not reactive. I want to have the business that I want to have. I want to work from home. I want to work not full time. I don't want to burn myself out doing this. Like that's pretty hypocritical of me, right? Stressing myself out when I tell people to reduce their stress.
Yes.
And I want to lead by example. I want to fuel my body. I want to fuel my mind. I want to fuel my spirit. And so to me, the art of living well is really encompassing this work-life harmony that is this constant recalibration to the needs of my husband, the needs of my family, my own needs, and the needs of my business. And I'm getting better and better and better at it every single year, but it does take quite a bit of intention, but it's so fun to feel like you're kind of finally hitting your stride in all of those different areas of life.
Okay, I love how you framed it as harmonization. I don't think anyone has used that word before, and it's beautiful and it encompasses it. And you're right, balance is so like, do we really have balance? And what does that even mean?
Yeah.
So that was such a beautiful synopsis of how you just summed everything up.
And your room is very balanced. Like you're sitting in the middle and I see the two shelves. It looks very balanced.
You know, it's so funny. So I'm a geriatric physical therapist by trade. And my entire life, I've not cared about decor or anything because I always saw people having to downsize to one apartment, like in an assisted living facility. And I'm like, they don't even get to take all of the things in their house. Like you get one room of stuff. But now I get it. And I think that it really comes from, I want to create a space that reflects my inside. Like I want the outside to reflect my inside. And we've moved into this 100-year-old farmhouse. I was telling you guys about it. And I've had such a good time. Like I redid all the floors. Yes. Like sanded them, stained them all by myself.
Yourself?
2 months.
That's impressive.
2 months. It was so fun. And, you know, decorating and just making my environment lovely because that reduces my stress and it helps me walk into the space and have the energy that I want. And so we didn't really get into a lot of specific stress management things today, but for me, that's an important one. Like keeping a clean, organized home really helps reduce my stress. Yes.
Agreed.
I'm right there. I'm 100%. It's like the physical clutter and the mental clutter are so interconnected for me.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's so hard when you have a spouse and children that don't necessarily agree.
You know, my
summer especially when everyone's running.
Especially. My husband, he's very clean. Our kids, you know, I try to at least keep like the front half of the car clean. Like if my side is clean and the passenger side is clean, I can ignore the back seat for a good amount of time. And I'm like, okay, we're just going to do our best here.
Yeah.
So I think that you can control what you can. And, you know, I had the opportunity to finally have my own space and I'm like, I'm going to make this what I want and I'm going to create the energy that I want in this space. And I love it. So thank you.
Oh, well, it's beautiful. If you're not listening on YouTube right now, head on over to our YouTube channel.
Thanks.
And thanks for coming on our show today. And we wish you a lovely day.
Yeah.
And good luck with all of your training, guys. That is so cool. I love hearing about those big endurance goals. I just did a half marathon in May and it was fun. But it's hard. Like those endurance activities can be challenging. So good luck.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Have a wonderful day. Bye, Morgan.
Bye.